All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this brand new podcast. It's called How to Stay in Your Heart in a World of Psychological Warfare. We decided not to pull any punches, even with the title. My name is Dr. Stu Bittman, and I have with me,
Hey, I'm Nicole Bonner.
and I am a retired chiropractor. I practiced for 24 years. Now I am mostly coaching and teaching workshops and stuff, hopefully inspiring chiropractors, especially these past 2 years. And Nicole is actually in the trenches,
Yep,
right?
I've been practicing for 22 years.
Woohoo!
22 years. And
Wow.
yeah, in the trenches these last few years, and also coaching and mentoring students and young docs.
Well, how valuable is that? Well, you must have graduated when you were 10, Nicole. So,
It
because my
was, I was
math is my
14.
math is pretty good. So why don't you share with everybody where this all came from and how I'm giving you credit for this brainstorm of this podcast.
Well, I have to give both of us credit for this, man, because
Yeah.
I don't know where it came from. It came from, I guess, the universe. It was a thought in my head, and this thought came in my head, and I'm kind of known for a thought coming through my head and out my mouth, and that's kind of what happened here. And the next thing I know is like, Stu, we're doing a podcast.
And I
So,
and I argued a lot with you, didn't I? You'll have to
oh
get used to
yeah, it took
sarcasm. You had 6 episodes to get used to sarcasm,
yeah, it
folks.
took a real twist of your arm.
Cool, go on.
So the last 2 years have presented, a number of different challenges, questions, and kind of what to do now. And so when COVID first started, I'm trying to remember back. Um, Nobody knew. It was really like, if a friend of mine, I'm going to give him credit, Dr. Fred Domenico, he put something out called, he did a podcast called Blindsided. And that's the word that's coming to me right now, Stu, because when COVID, this is what it was like in practice that day. I remember the day. I'm serving patients, adjusting patients one right after another, and then all of a sudden patients started coming in, and it was almost like it was the end of the world. Patients were coming in and they were like, we're going to be on martial law, we're going in lockdown. And it was one of those things where, I'm so, just like most chiropractors, when we're serving patients, and we're I think we're a different collection of people. Chiropractors are a different population of people than the rest of the population. So, like, I'm not immersed in anything that's happening in the news. So you got to see my perspective is, I'm serving patients, I'm immersed in what I'm doing, I'm turning the power on, and all of a sudden patients start coming in as if it's the end of the world. We had no idea. We were totally blindsided. We had no idea where, if what they were saying was even true at that point. We didn't know what the virus was. We didn't know where it came from. We didn't know. And so from a chiropractor's perspective, I don't think that, for most chiropractors, I don't think that we were necessarily in fear of the virus, but I think something that struck some fear was the fact that within a couple of days, we immediately knew something did not make scientific sense. Things were not, within a couple of days of this happening, of 2 weeks flattening the curve, like, anybody with a minimal amount of science background knew that this stuff that we were hearing on the news wasn't adding up.
Yeah. Yes.
So now, so between dealing with, patients now coming in with fear of the virus, and, the overstepping of the government, it created a lot of questions and uncertainty in practice, for myself. And then, I mentor people from all over the country. So, this was happening all over the country. And as mentors, I'm sure you experienced this. The first people they call is us, right?
Yes, definitely true. And again, I didn't experience a lot of the uncertainties that chiropractors in practice did, but I think for me, not only was it scientifically not adding up, but philosophically, it was not even in the equation. And the fear for me was a principle that I had advocated and taught and lived by and taught to a lot of other people, and who a lot of people had embraced and made significant changes in their life, was completely forgotten, was completely ignored, was, all of a sudden just a belief that maybe only works, or we think only works, when times are good, or when there's no pandemic, or, so as Sid Williams used to say, drop the keys, they're going to fall. It's a law. If the law is a law, then it applies always. And instead of maybe being a solid foundation for a lot of chiropractors, it really shook up the foundation for a lot of chiropractors. And I understand that, certainly, because they're caught up in, even though we are a different breed, we are exposed to the same psychological warfare and also the pressures of dealing with patients who were bombarded with all that stuff. So yes, it is an interesting time, isn't it?
It is. And Stu, maybe we should kind of define or clarify a little bit what we
What we're
mean
doing
by
here?
psychological warfare.
Yeah, what you described, the media, and also, the added element of convincing people they were doing the right thing, etc. So there was a lot of psychological warfare going on, and I know it's just the way our nervous system works. When we're in fear, we're in our base of our brain, we're in our reptile brain, where we don't have access to our beliefs, even, let alone our core values, our strengths. So that's
Right.
how I look at psychological warfare. It was like get everybody in their reptile brain, so they
Right.
don't really even know they have choices and stuff. Because again, that was one of the big things. It didn't seem for people that there were any choices, and the choices that they may have made 3 years ago were scared right out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And they used a lot of language and a lot of verbiage. So, I started catching on when I would hear like catchphrases in the media, like we're all in this together,
Right.
like stay home to save a life.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
I don't know about you guys over there in California, but here in New Jersey, on our regular channels, we have these commercials still that say stay home to save a life. And that's still going on today.
Right. Oh yeah,
And
do the right thing, and it's okay. It's just a minor inconvenience, and
exactly,
yeah.
And I think, it's important too for a lot of chiropractors out there that are going to be watching this podcast that are like-minded to you and I. I think it's important too to give them some comfort, because I had an aha moment about a year ago, and I had some chiropractors approach me who were strong in their philosophy, and they had a really good foundation of philosophy and the principle, Stu, and yet, and they raised their families. This was kind of fascinating. They raised their families in this philosophy. And the fascinating part was that these chiropractors were upset because their own sons and daughters were going out to get the vaccine. And they were blaming themselves. Like, there was a very emotional this happened actually a few times in a few conversations that I had with these chiropractors, and it was very emotional, and they were there were lots of tears being shed, and they were saying, I just don't get it. Like my son, my daughter is 26, 29 years old. They've been raised in our lifestyle. Like, they know better. Like, they mentally, intellectually know better, and yet they still got the shot. So, that's when I really had to say, you can't blame yourself. You did everything right as a parent. You did everything right as a parent. You did everything right as a chiropractor. And these people got into their minds. And that's
Oh,
what
yeah.
I call psychological warfare, is when you have sane, logical, intelligent people making decisions that are not congruent with who they are.
Mhm. Yes, sure sign of psychological warfare. Yes, yes, yeah, and yeah, coerced in all kinds of ways. You know, by a lot of young people. Admittedly, a lot of young people probably didn't question the whole vaccine thing to begin with. So to expect them to make a different choice at this point might have been, you know, uh, something to look at to begin with. But yeah, in order to travel and live a life and get into nightclubs and live, all this kind of stuff, a lot of young people who otherwise wouldn't have. So yes, so this was a full assault on the minds. And so
Yes.
yes, I guess what we're hoping to do with this podcast, and I'm not guessing, excuse that expression, is knowing what helped for me and what helped for Nicole and what helped for a lot of my clients who stood strong through this is, rising above. We have to rise above that level of thinking that is prone to psychological warfare and being swayed, and admittedly quite difficult. But for us, it revolves around finding our heart, and we'll be talking a lot more about that in subsequent episodes. Yeah, so it's but let me just say this: to have principles that chiropractic is based on, that Nicole will explain where they come in a second here, and to actually use them, to actually choose based on, to actually have them as comfort and helpful in making the tough choices and answering the really tough questions that every chiropractor in practice had to deal with. That is the key. That is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely the key. The only way to rise above the reptile level of thinking is to access our brain, because that automatically allows us to access the parts of our brain that do remember our beliefs and our values, and where our strengths lie, and where Abe Lincoln would have said the better angels of our nature hang out. So to cover those questions that so many chiropractors had to deal with as a result of the psychological warfare.
Yeah, man, there were there were a lot of things we had to consider. In the beginning, it was like, should we stay open or do we close down? Like, this was this is when we didn't really know what we were dealing with. The CDC guidelines were ridiculous. Like, they didn't even make sense. Like, do we
Which
follow them?
ones? Which ones are you talking about? Sorry.
All of them.
Okay.
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do we wear a mask? Some we never wear a mask in our office, but you know what? A lot of chiropractors around the country did, and it wasn't an easy decision, Stu, because we were being pressured to make a decision, not between our principles and our beliefs and our livelihood for some
Right.
people, for some chiros, and even
Mm-hmm.
some chiros in some states had to shut down. They didn't have a choice.
Right.
Like, health officials are walking into offices, they were walking into gyms, and I think a lot of people, had that chatter in the back of their mind,
Mm-hmm.
where is my practice going to be the next practice that a health official walks into?
Sure.
What do we have to do to for sanitization? um if we don't follow mandates, here's a big one: if we don't follow the mandates, are we willing to risk the consequences?
Yeah,
Right?
that's a big
Like,
one.
that's a big one for some people, because you know as much as we love to stay in the flow of heart and philosophy and principle, the chatter in the mind goes, oh man, I have a mortgage to pay.
Sure.
Right. How do we answer questions to patients about COVID? So I started doing videos right away, but you know, every video I did, my director of I guess it's director of marketing, whatever you want to call it, but the person that helps me with my social media, because I'm not great on computers, as you saw me trying to get on this Zoom call, right? She was like, you're going to be shut down. Like, when did we ever live in a world where a doctor couldn't speak truth in fear of getting shut down? Like, I've been on the planet 46 years. I've never seen that. How do we answer questions about the shot to patients? What do we say when patients come in fear? And or even worse, what do we tell a patient when they won't leave their home? Like, this is the stuff we had to navigate these past few years.
And how do you explain any of this to somebody who's not open to hearing any of it? And how do we speak our truth when people are shut down to it? Yeah, a lot of things, and a lot of these were even more complicated than that. I mean, I know chiropractors who chose to wear masks because they didn't want to scare their patients more, and I could see that, because we don't want people in a fear physiology when we adjust them. And so, I can't argue with a lot of these choices. It's especially not being in practice, I like to think I know how I would have answered all these questions. And the only way I would have is maybe by asking what I think is really the fundamental question. The principles that we espouse and that we teach and that are beautiful, the beautiful chiropractic principles, do we have just a belief in them? Or do we own them? Do we embody them? Do we have them so deep in our bones and our heart that we can use them again to make choices in tough times and to answer a lot of these questions? And so again, what we hope to reinforce for people, because on some level we all have more belief in chiropractic at seminars than when we go back into the world. But a lot of us have managed to take it to a level where we don't get weaker between seminars and stuff. And that's never before have we been more challenged to stand up for what we believe in. And I think it's really important to, as you said, to not beat ourselves up about maybe choices we've made up to now, because there's still going to be work to do.
Yeah.
I got to say, you're 40, what years on 46? I got a few years on you. I also have not seen that happen in the world before, where people really couldn't, especially doctors couldn't speak out. And yet I have seen, a trend toward this, what's happening now, happening for a long time. I remember, vaccine mandates being talked about during the Clinton administration. And so in a lot of ways, folks, if you didn't really speak up as chiropractors, the time for us maybe to have been really advocates for this was 35 years ago. So, but it's not too late, because when people start coming out of their fear and they remember that the psychological warfare they've been subject to is coming from places they never had any trust in before, really, until 2 years ago. And most people would have expressed some kind of distrust in media or government or even science prior to these last couple of years. So when people remember that, and now, what are they going to have to rely on? What are they going to have to feel safe in the world? What are they going to have to, be able to move on in life with the security of, with any kind of peace and ease? And I think we're the only ones who have the answer. We have the answer in our principles. So we're hoping to help you all just dive a little deeper into those, and maybe give you some insights into how you can use them to, again, rise above the level of thinking that might otherwise pull you down or pull you out of your strength, or, water it down or whatever might be happening. So where did the idea of using the principles for this come from?
Well, probably about a year into this COVID thing, I started going through just an emotionally tough time with it. I noticed that people who I never thought would get an experimental shot were getting the shot. Close friends and family members of mine. And that was like, that was taking my peace away. When patients and friends or family, people that I loved, people that I cared about, people that I respected, started getting the shot. And I think that's where that was my moment that I got shaken. And I had to, like you said, if you think about it, if prior to even one day before COVID, or before the media allowed us to know about COVID, if you asked one day, 24 hours before that happened, Stu, to the majority of the population, if you ask them one question, do you believe that the pharmaceutical industry has your best interest at heart? I would bet to say that probably 99% of the population would say no. And yet in 24 hours, they buckled. Yeah. That was like a reality hit for me. And then, I would ask them and I would say, because I was wondering why they were being coerced. They were literally being coerced into doing things that they didn't believe was the right thing to do. Yep. And most everybody, when I asked them, most everybody said that it was because they felt like they were being pushed either by a family member or by their medical doctor, their medical community. So they were being coerced or pushed into doing something that they innately didn't want to do. I knew it was going to be a big problem. And it is. Like now what we're seeing 6 months to a year in practice, clinically, what we're seeing is people are having problems after the shot. We're seeing everything from myocarditis, brain bleeds, strokes, TIAs, and autoimmune. And this is a
flare-ups of cancer. Have you seen
flares up of cancer? Man, like this is real. This is what's happening in real life practice right now. And it's jolting to the emotional system of my body because it's like, oh my God, I almost want to say I told you so, although I would never do that, but it's like now I'm not sure how to help you.
It's not the way we wanted people to gain awareness about all this. Yes. Yeah.
So I started paying attention. I'm a person that kind of likes to live in her own bubble. I live in my own space. I live in my own bubble. I don't wear a mask. I don't listen to the media. Kind of like probably a lot of chiropractors listening to this podcast right now, but I had to get out of my own bubble because I had to figure out what the hell was happening. And when I did, that's when I started noticing the psychology, like the slogans I was telling you about before, be safe. Patients would leave the office and be like, be safe. Be like, why wouldn't I be safe? It didn't even occur to me why I wouldn't be safe.
And make sure while you're driving home to text everybody while you're driving and tell them to be safe.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry, it's hard for me not to make humor out of things because that's how I deal with a lot of my emotional challenge. But go on.
It's all good. It's all good. And you hear things like, are you getting boosted? Get boosted. Mask up. That was one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Mask up. Yep. That became a slogan. That became ingrained and wired into people's heads. Mm-hmm. And people were saying it. They weren't even conscious. They weren't even conscious of what they were saying. They're
Yep.
repeating these slogans.
Mhm.
And that's when I had an aha moment. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to make a difference in people's lives if I don't look at this from a different perspective. And that's where I said, all right, this is psychological warfare. We're not going to use logic to change people's minds.
Yes.
And that was the start of my journey, immersing myself into the 33 chiropractic principles. Because when I started to do that, I found that, a principle is a law. And like you had alluded to earlier, it's true no matter what. It's true in a pandemic, it's true out of a pandemic. So because it's a law and it's a truth, it's something that we can rely on. It's something that can be our foundation, Stu, as chiropractors. We can lean on those principles as truth. And any question, what I found is that any question that comes up as to how to ... we can refer back to the principles and answer the question with truth.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes. And you told me you started seeing the number 33 everywhere too, right? That was another sign.
Well, see, yeah. So I'm a numbers person.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by I'm a numbers person, I don't mean that I am not a math person, but I do believe that the universe kind of communicates with me through numbers. And shoot, man, the number 33 was coming up. It was coming up. It was coming up. It was coming up on like the clock, everything, Stu. And that's when it, like, once again, the thought came down through my head, and it was like the 33 principles.
Nice. Nice. So here we are.
And here we are.
Here we are.
And you've been working on something, I don't know how long, the past year, heart math.
I've been involved with heart math stuff for a long, long time.
Okay.
My wife just became certified resilience mentor. Heart Math Institute has been around, I'm not sure, 20 years or something. And they have done incredible research into how we can overcome psychological warfare. It's not their motto by any means, but it is perfect for not only chiropractors, but for the world right now. Because again, to make the kind of choices, to answer the kind of questions we're being asked to answer, and to make the kind of choices we're being asked to make, takes a lot of strength, takes a lot of, excuse the expression, self-love. I don't know about you, but I've tried to make big choices in life from a place of, excuse the expression, I suck, or I need to do this to fix myself, or, I'm lacking in some way, and so I need something surgically removed from me so I can be, I don't grow from those places. I don't evolve from those places. I don't stay strong from those places. And yet, when I feel good about myself, when I feel grounded in my heart, it's a lot easier to make choices. And heart math explains why. Again, I touched on it before when and we'll get into this in more detail probably in the next episode. But when our heart's engaged, meaning when you and I are in a state of gratitude or compassion or love or joy or peace, all those places that we like to be, by the way, then automatically we think better. Our whole system is more at ease. And as we're going to explore, because we're going to rewrite one of the principles, by the way, I'm warning you in advance. It's the last one, so it may take us a while to get there. But in chiropractic, we talk a lot about brain to body and interference between brain and body. And yet, as heart math has shown, the brain works a lot better at running the body when the heart's engaged. And one thing really quick that they have discovered is there's a lot more nerve information running from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. The brain essentially controls two things about the heart. That's heart rate and stroke volume. And yet the heart, through its nerve messages to the brain is informing the brain about everything in the body, about the general state of the body, about the emotional state of the body. And again, when
Wow.
we are what they're calling a coherent state, which is a term you're hearing more and more, a coherent state, which in chiropractic you could call a state of ease, to use our terminology, then the nerve messages running from our heart to our brain get past our reptile brain. When we're in a state of fear, when we're in a state of overwhelm, we're in a state of holy crap, when we're in a state of judgment, when we're in a state of anger, when we allow the world to pull us into that level of vibration, we're dumb. We are automatically dumb because the nerve messages from the heart can't get past our emotional centers, our automatic, our brain stem. So we have to engage the heart in order for the higher centers of our brain, to the ones that remember what's important to us, the ones that remember these principles, the ones that remember our values and our strengths and all our faculties and all our resources. Can't do it without the heart. So that's what we're going to be exploring, how the heart relates to all the principles and how the principles can help us stay in our heart so we can actually apply them and actually use them and actually rely on them, as you said, and so they can be a foundation in any storm. Because I just heard this wonderful song that I'm going to have to play next time, something about when the bones of the house are good, it can withstand anything. So when the bones of our foundation, when the bones of our belief system, when the bones of our soul are good, meaning strong, based on principle, based on unwavering universal principles that haven't changed ever, then the house is good, and the house can withstand any storm, and the house can be a house for other people. The house can be a safe haven for other people and an inspiration for other people, as I know most of our listeners want to be. So, hey, that was pretty good. That was a pretty good segue, because I think we're probably getting out of time, aren't we?
We are, yeah. So we are
We wanted to keep it to 33 minutes.
I don't know. Did we make 33 minutes?
I don't have any idea. We'll find out.
We're coming close, but I'll let you know when we're done.
Okay.
All right. So this is probably a really great place to wrap up our first episode. And for those of you guys that are listening, this is going to be like a little mini series podcast. And we're going to do how many? 6? Stu, we're doing total of 6.
This is number 1 of 6.
This is going to be 1 of 6. Every other week for about 12 weeks.
That's the plan. That's the plan. And Nicole called it a shot podcast, which I thought was some new social media term, but it was just a misprint for short podcast. But
I like shot better.
I like shot. So it's going to be a shot 6-week podcast. Yes. So we will be back in 2 weeks.